All right, hey guys, this is Hunter and Makala from and Sally from On's Birth Talk, and we're gonna go over some sex ed questions today, and some sex ed topics. And so, one of the first questions to start off with is, what is um, what is something that young men in general, from junior high to high school, and maybe even young men graduating, should maybe know about their bodies, as well as like how should they kind of react, or maybe how should they be around other men and women that they're their same age, but it's not their bodies, because maybe touch on the wrist is too much in one situation, whereas in, touch on the shoulder is okay in another, or maybe, just maybe subtle hints, or realizing that maybe somebody may be struggling with something sexually or in their head or about their body or whatever, about somebody else, and maybe not picking on them for that kind of reason, or, kind of go off of that topic.
Yeah.
Who wants to go first?
Go for it, Sally.
So personally, I think when you're approaching sex ed, everyone should know everything about their own body. Self-exploration is the best thing you can promote for any person of any age. This is not only good for sex education, but overall health. You're going to know when something is wrong with your body. You're going to catch things earlier because you just have that notion that you've already learned, like, this is my regular and this is just slightly out of my regular. And when it comes to differences within men, I know that this can be very different than women, and I'm a mother of all boys, so I completely understand this. And one thing you want to absolutely know is that sizes, shapes, are colors, what some people might even think is disfigured, is probably more normal. There's very few things that are abnormal when it comes to your genitalia and sizes and shapes. You are all very unique. If you do have something you're struggling with and you do want to ask a friend, I would suggest not asking them in the locker room when everyone's naked.
Yeah.
Would be my first thing. Don't do that. But if you can go confide in a friend, do that. And if you can't confide in a parent or an adult that's close to you or related to you, definitely doing it within your school system of a teacher or somebody that you can trust, who you think is probably more open-minded, is the better way to go. If you go to someone who is like a pastor or within the religious system, I think you're not going to get as much information as you'd like, or someone from that background. So if you're actually looking for honesty and openness, look for a person who has that within themselves before you even ask the question.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what Sally said about getting to know your own body first. I think that being comfortable with who you are and having a background of what the changes and the things that your body is going to go through from puberty and on is really important. And that's something that we don't, men, you just don't get a lot of information on. So again, finding somebody that is that you're comfortable talking with is going to be really important, because you want to have that healthy mindset of your own body before you, and because really comparison with others doesn't do anybody any good in any situation, even though it happens all the time.
Right, especially in the locker room, because I never got picked on because I was like 6 foot in high school, but I know that there was plenty of guys who didn't have my size, my height, my muscular build and stuff like that, and so I know that trying to find something to confide into was kind of hard in high school, especially because again, everybody that I hung around was always like a macho guy, so it's like if you weren't just like the biggest dude, then it was like whatever.
Right.
And so the same kind of question, but for girls, right? Like, what should girls know about like their own sexual education that they may not find inside the high school or within their own parent or their own social circle, and like how should they maybe react to other women and other girls in their like social circle, as well as boys, or like guys and boys that they know? Because I think it's I know I've met a few parents now where they kind of say the same thing, where it's like caring for a boy is easy because you only have to care about one penis, whereas if you care for a girl, you have to worry about all the penises. I just thought it was kind of a funny quote, and it's like I was like, oh, I guess that's kind of true, but I've never had a girl, so I don't know. But as a guy, I can kind of understand that.
Well, I have one boy and two girls, and to be honest with you, I will approach sex ed with all three of them pretty much the same way, in the sense that it's important to know, again, everything about your body. Like Sally said, understanding your body and your genitalia and whether it, as well as how your body puts on weight, and the different changes it goes through. I will do that with all three of my kids in the same manner. However, having two girls, it is very important for me that we talk about body not in terms of weight, but in terms of health, and what it is that they're putting in their body and how that helps them. That food is fuel, not it's not about I'm getting fat, or I'm too skinny, or I'm too tall, or I'm too short.
Right.
Instead, very much about you've been given a body and how to take care of it. And so I think that it's everything to do with your body: weight, balance, hormones, uh, your genitals, your changing, everything that has to do with it is important to talk about. What were you going to say, Sally?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Approaching it very similarly is the best way. Knowing everything about your body. The other side to that too is when it comes to hitting that puberty and you're changing and everything. One of the books that I found was "Let's Talk About Sex," and I think it's by Sam Gitchell. And it's a great age appropriate book for younger people. And it explains going through puberty, but it also says that you can't speed it up. You can't change when it's going to happen or anything like that. And a lot of it is genetic. So if you're questioning your puberty or how things are going to go for you, my advice to young people is to go ask their parents, when did you go through puberty and how was it for you? Because generally speaking, that's probably going to be very similar to how you're going to approach your puberty and the stages that you're going to go through. And so talking to our parents is going to be very key. And I know we'll probably talk about this in a little bit, but also giving parents the tools to talk about it and the know-how to be comfortable speaking to their children about it is very important.
Right. And I love that you brought up the book. It's important to get your knowledge from, whether you are a parent giving the knowledge to kids, or whether you're a kid looking for knowledge. It's important to get it from reputable sources.
Right.
It's we are in a day and age where we Google everything, but not everything on Google is going to be
right. Exactly.
So having a book list and getting evidence-based books and articles is going to be the best thing that you can do, rather than just sometimes asking a friend isn't the best option, because they may not know what they're talking about, and so you're going to get misleading information. But another thing is, when it comes to being embarrassed about talking about sex or sex ed or your body, parents, if you're not, if you, even if you are embarrassed, but if you don't act embarrassed, then your child is going to be more apt to come to you for those answers. And then same as a child, like if you approach your family with a question and act like serious about it, then it's going to be an easier conversation.
Right.
Yeah, so I just kind of want to touch on is that I didn't really. I liked how both of you guys kind of said that you would kind of teach them the same exact thing, basically, right? That there's no difference in how you would teach sex ed to a male or a female, whether they're younger or older. I never thought of it that way, but I guess it technically would be the same thing, right? That there really is no major differences. You don't want to teach a difference between the two sides, because then there's a weird difference between the two.
Right.
And then the other thing that I thought was really good was talking about like puberty within your parents, which was again another thing that really wasn't brought up in my household, mainly because I was homeschooled, and I was homeschooled throughout middle school, and I went to high school for real school, and I was always kind of like, well, when will I hit puberty? Like, when does that happen and stuff like that? When I had pretty much already gone through it my first year of high school, I was, like I said, I was already way bigger than everybody else. My voice I mean, of course, my voice still cracked all the time, and it still does. I'm 25 and it still cracks. And it was just like, it was like I had already gone through a lot of the major hormonal changes when I was, a couple of years back and stuff. I just hit it really, really early on, because as soon as I hit 6 foot, I just stopped growing. It stopped growing.
Yeah.
I got bigger muscular wise in high school, but that was just because all the sports and all the extra food I was eating and stuff like that. But as far as like, um, I think like that, like I knew that there was a lot of people that I hung out with in high school that were, that didn't really get like their bone structure. They weren't very muscular. They, like they, had really high voices and stuff like that. But I never thought about going and asking your parents that question because yeah, that would be the best person to go ask is, hey, Dad, when did you do it?
Right.
Here's an example too. My son, who just turned 15 last week, is on the swim team for the high school. So they walk around, boys and girls are walking around in virtually nothing.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I was on swim team.
The boys are walking around in these, skin tight swim jammers is what they call them, or some Speedos. And then the girls are walking around in tiny little swimsuits. And you can definitely tell, like having that conversation before they joined swim team was really important, because talk about comparing yourself, and when the boys are standing there getting ready to, get on the blocks to start the race, you can physically see differences between, you might not know their age or anything, but you can see the ones that have gone through puberty or are currently going through it versus the ones that haven't hit it yet. Or maybe they're just beginning. And so we've had that conversation where he's like, gosh, well, when are my shoulders going to get broader? This kid that was only, 6 months older than me was so much bigger, and maybe not height wise, but just the
muscular wise. Right.
And so the more confident and the more you know that your body, like Sally said, it hits at different times, and there's no real rhyme or reason to it other than genetics.
Yeah, I was on swim team too, and yeah, you could always tell. Yeah, it was always weird seeing like all the guys get up, whether they could be 15 or 18. It was all different kinds of body types up there. It's absolutely ridiculous.
We actually only have a swim team of 6 boys on the team, and I asked one of the coaches, I was like, gosh, why are not many boys swimming? And she's like, well, if they haven't been exposed to it before high school, then high school is not the time they're going to start, because who wants to go put on a tight pair of swim jammers for the first time when your body's changing?
Oh, yeah.
And I never even thought about it.
Another thing to add too is when you're approaching sex ed, on either side, educating on both sexes is vital. You have to do it. You can't just educate females on female bodies and males on male bodies. And I think that is the breakdown in generally sex ed when it's taught in class, is that they don't really dive into the other sex. Boys need to understand what a period is and the outcome of a period and the reasons a period has happened. Girls need to understand what wet dreams are and why guys get boners, and why in the middle of the day they can randomly be thinking about sex all the time and they have no control over it. And it's very, very important to educate on both sides of each sex, because at some point those sexes are going to come together, and that's what's screwing us too.
Well, yeah, it's like I didn't know anything about the female body until I started asking my girlfriend. We've been together for 9 years, and I'd say maybe because I moved up right after college, and I didn't really start asking her questions about herself until like 4 or 5 years into the relationship.
Right.
But I know pretty much nothing about the female anatomy, like whatsoever.
Right.
It was absolutely mine. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know anything.
Right.
Well,
being an injustice, because when you do come together and you guys, there's no communication because you're so worried about what the guy is thinking about you, what the girl is thinking about you, like vice versa. That causes tension in a relationship that can have effects later down the road.
Right. Luckily, my girlfriend and I are pretty open to each other. Like, we don't really keep anything from each other, so
that's good.
Got that out of the way. And so the next question kind of plays off of the first two, where it's kind of like, what do you think about adults and parents on sex ed? So, how do you think that parents of all types, ones that maybe only believe in abstinence, ones that believe in have sex whenever you want, ones that maybe just don't know how to approach it and stuff like that, how do we kind of get the topic of sex education inside the homes? Because that's where I think it kind of needs to start, right? Is to at least plant the seed and then have them either ask questions or have them ask questions at the school and stuff like that. So how do we kind of get parents to start talking about it?
Can I start real quick with saying, as a childbirth educator, you would be surprised at how many couples show up to our class that don't understand their own their own bodies. And so you're really at childbirth ed should not be your first introduction to sex ed.
Right.
And so I think the key takeaway there is to, as parents, educate yourselves so that you can educate your children. And that would be, it's super vital to change that conversation. Because if you are educated, you're going to feel more comfortable talking to your children about it.
So for me, when you bring up all the different avenues that you can take in sex education, whether it's abstinence, do what you want, come talk to me or whatever, it doesn't matter. You still have to, the education needs to be there no matter what. The knowledge of bodies and what's normal and what's not normal needs to be there first. And then secondly, I don't think teaching any form of either go out and do it or abstinence is wrong or right. It all stems from making sure that when you're bringing up your child and teaching them about sex education, you're also covering, morals, personal ethics, and standards for what your child wants for their body. And so when you take it into that realm, it's very important to understand that if a child chooses abstinence, that's great.
Yeah.
Forcing a child into abstinence or any sexual boundaries that they don't choose for themselves is never going to be something that they're going to follow.
Right.
So I don't think it's wrong or right. I definitely don't advise you to tell your child to go out and just have sex whenever they want. I do think that is a bit irresponsible because emotionally, teaching it from an emotional standpoint, they need to be ready and understand what the consequences of sex have. Not only physically, like pregnancies, STIs, STDs, but emotionally. I can't tell you how many people I've interviewed or spoken with as a sexual empowerment coach, an educator that have come from a negative place of sex and through their lifespan into their 30s and sometimes 40s have finally at that point reached what they would consider a sex positive lifestyle. But it took a lot of work and self-evaluation and self-assessment to do that. If we can bridge that gap early enough and earlier with children, teaching them the entire aspects of sex education from emotions, physical, all of it, we're going to take away a lot of that pain that they can would have to go through later in life. And so yeah, the part of that would definitely be making sure they understand what their morals and their ethics and what they have as standards for themselves within a sexual positive lifestyle.
I think it comes down to self-reflection as well as self-worth. So more so than you should abstain until you're married, or you should whatever your like a religious view or anything like that. It's really about yourself, and also the more you know, the more you can make informed decisions, which is what Honest Talk International is all about in every realm of your life, is to make informed decisions when you have all the pieces of the puzzle. You can say, okay, I have all of these things in front of me. This is what I'm choosing to do, and feel confident in it,
Right.
instead of embarrassed or shamed or guilted or pressured. It's all about creating that confidence in boys, girls, men, women, and being able to take ownership of who you are.
I think that's a really good point of bringing like self-reflection on like younger people as well as even older people, maybe getting, maybe again, like how you said, like being sex positive finally in their life at like maybe the age of 30 versus like self-reflection at a younger ages. When I was in high school is like I didn't really lose my virginity until even after high school, like until even after I graduated. And one of the things that led to that was I didn't know how I was going to be successful. I just wanted to do something else, right? And so like to me, my parents always kind of said, and it was kind of like a negative thing where it was like, I don't want to say negative, but they were like, look, if you want to do anything with your life, you can't have a kid in high school, right? Like that's just what they said. They're like, that's just how it works. Like once you have a kid, your life is over and their life begins. So if you're trying to do something, wherever it may be, you can't do it then. You could try, but they basically was like, do not do that. And so like
Right.
me in high school, it was just like, oh, like I don't want a kid, you know, it was like stay away from girls in general, like you know, like just go to school, stay to the books and stuff like that. But I
You know,
knew that I wanted to, you know, do something
yeah.
more basically.
But the thing is, even after like I graduated from high school, when I was married and had a kid and got pregnant in my 20s, which was, you know, socially acceptable at that point, I literally the first words that came out of my mouth were, "Oh my gosh, what are we going to tell our parents?" And that is not a healthy mindset. I mean, I, for all intensive purposes, you know, did it the way that society says to do it,
Right.
and
Date, get
still
married,
had
baby.
this fear and stress that I had, you know, that was put on me, that whether I put it on myself or it came from family or however, you know, growing up, that movies, you know, all of that plays a role in how you perceive the right versus the wrong. And I think what we're trying to get across is there is no right or wrong, but it's all about having the information.
Right. It's like
Right.
having the knowledge and knowing that
Yeah.
it'll be okay.
All of it too, and in every aspect. I think when we bring up sex education, we just think physically.
Yeah.
And that's exactly, sex ed is where your mind goes to, is just physical. And sex is it, once you get older, you know this, sex is so much more than just a physical experience. The emotions that go into it, the catalysts, all the things that follow that, and sometimes stick with us and then become part of what I would call our sex story.
Right.
So important. And so changing sex ed from just the physical into really getting all of the pieces, like Michaela said, is another gap that we need to bridge.
So that kind of leads into like a little bit of the next question that I have here, where it's any of the sex ed that I've ever like done my own research or like read about or anything, a lot of it doesn't really touch on, like you said, the emotional or the hormonal side of it. You know, so kind of like what would you kind of tell like younger people and even adults about those two sides? Like what, you know, like what is the emotional side of sex education and what is the hormonal side of sex education? Because like yeah, you had said previously, you're like, yeah, like girls need to know why is it that guys just get random boners, right? Like it just happens in us, you know, and you know it's definitely like a huge hormonal and maybe even a you know an emotional thing as well.
Yeah.
Okay, I can go first. When it comes to finding the resources to do that right now, honestly, the resources are limited to what I would consider books or people like Michaela and myself who understand the importance of doing so. Um, and also those parents who are a little bit more forward thinking. Um, a lot of the emotional stuff we don't get from actual conversations, we get from viewing it of our parents. So if you have parents who are not physical, not hugging, not loving, but still having sex or whatever, that's the impression that you get of the emotional standpoint, whether it is intentional or unintentional, versus a child who lives in a loving home, sees their parents flirting and very sexual. That is another form of sex education that we miss in our home. Or other adults that you see out in public, or whatever you view on TV. All of that is also considered sex education on an emotional level. Take 50 Shades of Grey. For anyone who is younger that would watch that, even young teens who are maybe 18, 19, 20, they think that that's a normal, healthy, emotional, dream-like relationship, when essentially it's not. It is a very abusive relationship and very controlling. And we don't see it that way because it's portrayed so differently.
What's portrayed as a fantasy.
Right, exactly. And so getting down, like, understanding the knowledge behind it, understanding what a sex drive is, why some people are in a minute, yes, why some people want sex more, why some people want sex less. All these things come up later, and it's extremely important to cover it. And books is a great way to go about doing it, especially for younger people, because and parents to read together. It's going to give you the vocabulary that you might be missing to have these conversations with your child.
I love that you touched on the vocabulary, because there are, you know, there's so many names out there for the male and female genitalia, and you know, tend to use what our parents used, when it's just kind of that continuous cycle. But it is important to know the anatomical terms for your body. And when you can talk using the proper vocabulary, then it does take, in my opinion, take a little bit of that embarrassment
Right.
and the giggling away, because it's the human anatomy.
Yeah.
It's you know um but I think honestly, our bodies were designed for a purpose, and knowing that, and taking it from that angle when you're educating yourself or educating your kids, is important to keep in mind.
The other part to that, when you say, talking about the anatomical names, even non-anatomical names, like that are, I guess, would be more like dirty talk for adults, like or clit or all those things, or like, it's important to say. Let me just say, because I can't tell you how many clients I've had as adults that say, I want to be more sensual and sexual with my partner, but I don't have the vocabulary because they're so embarrassed to even say words that have to do with sex. We've put sex on such a back burner, and made it so disgusting, for lack of a better word, that we can't even use the vocabulary that we do have to talk about it. So starting at a younger age, talking about the sexual organs and what they are, and even different names for them, whether you think that it's a proper term or something that is a little bit more risque, do it, because later in life it's going to benefit the child and yourself with having a sex positive vocabulary.
So to kind of like tie all these questions together, I would say, where do you guys kind of draw the line as far as how much should sexual education come from the home versus the school, and then maybe people who are homeschooled, right? So, right, there's not that many resources on the internet. Maybe kids, don't want to go research it. They don't want to go find a parent or a trusted advisor. But maybe kind of like stepping forward from here in the future, like what should the home be teaching their children? Is it everything? Is it just a little bit, just a tipping off point? And then what should the schools be teaching the kids? Because like from my standpoint, it was, my opinion, it should be kind of like you can tell me your opinion, is that at the home, they should definitely tell you as much as possible, right? Like your parents should be able to tell you and discuss sex ed on all aspects because they made you. And then I think that when you go to school, they should kind of touch on basically being around so many of the opposite sex, right? Or people that, or maybe the same sex you're attracted to, right? And then they kind of like, it's like when you're at home, it's more solo, and then when you're at school, it's more group therapy, I guess you could say. Do you guys kind of like that opinion, or maybe that there's a better way to teach it?
Yeah, I truly believe that first and foremost it should come from the home, but only if the parents have an understanding. So I really think that it is our obligation as parents. We are the parents. School is a supplement to what we provide at home, in my opinion. And so I think that it's a parent's obligation to educate themselves so that they can in turn educate their children. Now, that's not going to be every parent. Every parent's not going to have the drive to educate themselves. And as far as the school goes, I think that they need to also have the education. The sex ed teachers, the people that are teaching in our school system, are not educated. So the school system has an obligation to educate the instructors first and foremost, so that what they're giving to our students is real information and not just bits and pieces of it, but instead the whole. I really think whether you get it all from home, all from school, bits and pieces, like everybody that is aiming to educate on sex ed should have an understanding of it all.
So what would like, so if we're taking sex ed as a whole, what would be like 5 major key points that parents should know, as well as that maybe they don't know already, or they should go look up, right? Like maybe like 1 to 5 key topics that they should go look up themselves to maybe be like, oh yeah, I don't understand that well, as well as like what are 5 key topics that younger people that they should know, that they may not know, or they may not get from the current sex education that they're getting now.
Yeah, go for it, Sally.
Okay. So I'll touch on this topic, and then I want to go back to what we were just talking about too, because I want to answer that question.
Okay.
So like five key topics. This is a good one. Okay. So self-exploration and masturbation. Everything is normal. Most definitely. Emotional mood swings and how to combat those, whether it's dietary, or understanding your emotions in general. Let me think. Okay, so
I mean, those are 4 pretty solid ones that.
Yeah, I'm like trying. I know there's like probably one more that I can pull out.
I mean, would you say that like pregnancy would be a big 5th one, just because it's like a kind of the result of it, or would you say that
right,
not as much?
So if I would have answered the other question, I probably would have made it a little more clear. So understanding consequences, yeah, I would probably make that a big one. Just outcomes of sex.
I like the term outcomes more than
outcome. Yeah,
consequences sounds a little negative.
Of sex. That's why I changed it. Outcomes of sex would be a really big. I think that umbrellas a lot of things that come from sex. But I do just real quick want to touch on the topic of the sex at home versus sex at school. I agree with Michaela that sex should most definitely mainly come from the home if the parents have a well understood education of their own sexuality and are comfortable talking about it. Well, even I guess if they don't understand it, but are willing to learn, I guess that would
be learn along with your
learning with your kids. The best way I would say to do it is get a self-study guided book. You can do tons of research. Amazon has a lot of great books. Let me actually see. I have some down here. Like they have these 30 days of sex talks. Who is this by? Diana Alexander. The Let's Talk About Sex. There's also some for people who are in the LGBTQ community, and I think it's now LGBTQIA. So just want to make sure I get that right. But there's tons of things you can look up, and they also have them for age appropriate sections. So like 8 to 10, 11 to whatever, and so on and so forth. So you can go through and do age appropriate sex ed courses.
I would also say kids are learning or at least being exposed to the topics of sex earlier and earlier.
Yeah. 8 is not too young to be talking about sex at all. 3 is not too young to be explaining sex in some form, whether it's just talking about their genitalia, not shaming them for playing with themselves, that self-exploration. Even as a sex educator, I find myself looking at my boys who have their underwear down or hands in their pants, and I want to be like, knock that off. And I have to remind myself, don't say knock that off. Just say, hey, can you go in your bedroom? Or, hey, pull your hands out for me. And not scolding them for doing it, but also making it known for their age, like you only touch yourself, things like that. But to go into that a little bit further, when it comes to going into a school and sex education, until a school is willing to break down the barriers and actually have a real conversation about sex, I think they really need to restructure their sex education, because right now it isn't answering anything. It is very mild, and it's leaving them with more questions, and it's fear-based. Fear-based education is never anything positive, and you can never approach a child from anyone from a negative point of view. Even when you look at goal setting, you always set your goal from a positive standpoint. So our brain just does not interpret negatives. It doesn't compute them. And there's plenty of studies to back that up if you ever want to look those up. But our brain computes things from a positive standpoint. So when you present it positively, that's what's going to actually set and take and when you're teaching. And if how you said, talking about group standpoints, I absolutely agree with that. If they did it as a group therapy session of this is normal, he's normal, she's normal, we're all normal, we all look different, different breast sizes, 2 different testicle sizes, all this stuff, whether they hang low, up high, it's all normal, would be great. Realistic pictures would be even better.
Right. Instead of like those, like, artist illustrations inside books and whatnot,
right.
you know?
And even on the internet, a lot of those, and I was trying to find this for the conference that I did with young girls, trying to find different sizes of clitorises and outer lips and labias and all that stuff. It's hard. And even finding it, the ethnic differences is hard. What you find right now is what is in porn, which is nice, tight, white, pretty vaginas, or really big,
Really large penises.
yeah, dicks and penises. And so you don't have a very good understanding of what other people's anatomies look like. And even doing so in the locker room, you can't just sit there and look around the room and actually stare at people, you know, but we do it very coy-like, where we want to understand what other people look like, because it's just an innate instinct in ourselves to understand and compare ourselves. It's just, we can't help it. So if we can do it in a more positive way, or have a platform to actually talk about the differences within our body, I think that'd be super positive.
I kind of want to touch. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say a couple things. I think the school system would benefit greatly from bringing in a professional
from their own sex ed teachers,
having their,
right,
the teacher teach it.
Right.
And then also, I can tell you again from a childbirth educator standpoint that we are seeing the ramifications of the lack of sex ed on women and couples that are entering the childbearing years. And that's unfortunate, because you're seeing that's, especially in our country, you have, raising a rise of maternal death rates. You have a rise of cesarean sections and all these things. And I honestly believe that if we knew more about our bodies, that we could be our advocate for ourselves.
Yes.
I'd like to kind of touch back on when you were breaking down age groups. So what are some major kind of like identifiers within sex education for like the age groups? Like, what should you look for, like in your 3-year-old, in your 5-year-old, in your 7-year-old? Like what are some major, like I guess, like bullet points or like standing points almost? And it's like, obviously you shouldn't be talking, to your 3-year-old about maybe women delivering a baby, right? Because they're not really going to understand that. So like, what will a 3-year-old understand, and what should they be doing? What maybe should they not be doing? And like, what are some ages and kind of like, I don't want to say goals, but like major sections for like those age groups?
So when they start younger, generally it's self-exploration and masturbation. Kids as young as 2, 3, 4 can start masturbating. Girls generally do it in a rocking motion. Boys will just play with themselves. And it's self-gratifying. And then slowly, I think if you look there, I know there's a psychology book that states the different ranges of sex, but I know they go into like butt play at some point, where like you'll hear kids shoving things up their butt or playing with their butthole, or boys running around saying poop and all this. That's like kind of like the butt phase. And then you go into privacy. They want privacy. They don't see them. They understand that something is now changed about themselves, and they don't like that people are looking at them. And that comes with teaching them how to cleanse themselves. And, if they are having any issues, they need to come talk to you at that point. And that can go all the way up into 8. And then 8, 9, and 10 is really where you want to start talking about
the physical, emotional.
Right, is when you really want to get into an actual sex ed, where it is, what is masturbation, using the proper terms. Boys need to learn about what wet dreams are, because at some point that's going to start coming up. Periods are starting to come up, and you're really going to want to start going through that. And then as you gradually go into it, they'll hear things and they'll come to you with questions. My best advice for parents talking to a child of any age is, if they come to you with a question about whether it's, blowjobs, oral sex, or anything like that, answer them honestly. Don't try to shelter them, because if they feel like you weren't completely honest and open and gave them the full answer, they're going to go look for it somewhere else. Kids are very knowledge based. They want to know.
Yeah.
Can't say do that just because doesn't work if you don't tell them they're going to find the answer somewhere else. So be honest, be completely open, and give them the full story. And then couple that with the emotional side of, these are the outcomes that come with that. I don't think you're ready for that. Here is why I don't think you're ready for that. Do you have any other questions? And really keep that platform open for them to discuss it.
I also think that it's okay as a parent to say, I don't know, let's find out.
Right.
Or I don't know, I will find out and come back to you, but I promise I'll have an answer for you by, give time limit.
Right.
So that way they don't go find it themselves, but instead you're human. I learned that through homeschooling my kids. I don't have all the answers if I don't have the teacher's book, I don't always have all the answers.
Right.
And so it is okay and even beneficial to say that you don't understand or you don't know, but that you're going to find out.
Right.
I really like the way that you put that, where you said, because one of my next questions was going to be like, okay, well, let's say your 13-year-old daughter does come to you and asks about blowjobs. How do you explain that and then not maybe like lead them to just start going experimenting with all these guys? I really appreciate that you kind of like brought that in, where you said, well, you tell them about the outcomes from the emotional standpoint of what will happen, from it. You kind of come at it almost at a neutral point, and then you have all your outcomes, so to speak, not consequences, but there could be consequences too. Consequences and outcomes, and then that way you kind of like even those two standpoints out.
One of the stigmas that comes with sex education is that if we give them too much information, all of a sudden they're going to become these like sex addicted little children running around making babies, and that's
the opposite.
So not true. If anything else, what I think it does is keeps them from doing some things because it sounds scary, truthfully. And they just want to know. If they don't know, I think they're more inclined to try it and understand it from their own perspective and do it more when they don't know what they're doing, because they're trying to understand. Whereas if you give them that knowledge, it takes like letting a child drink at the age of 16, 17 at home, having a beer or whatever. I know I grew up drinking wine. I love wine, but I did it from a young age, and my parents specifically did that because when I got to an age where I was able to drink, it was no longer this poo thing for me. I had been doing it for so long. Now I wasn't getting drunk. I was having a glass of wine every once in a while with dinner or whatever. But it took that newness, that sense of adventure away. So giving kids knowledge and understanding of things, I think, takes away that almost urge to do it, because they're like, oh yeah, I already know what that is. Does that make sense?
No, it totally makes sense, because my family was the same way with alcohol. Like I grew up drinking alcohol. And again, not just getting wasted at my own family's expense. It was just little by little by little. So that when I was in high school and all my friends like going to parties and drinking and whatnot, to me it was like I don't really care to do that. Like I'm just going to stay home instead.
Exactly.
And even now that I'm older,
it shows. I went to some of the people I went to high school with that lived a very sheltered life and weren't exposed to anything. They were the ones that the minute they were out on their own and had a little bit of freedom around them were the ones that were going to the parties and drinking heavily and not showing up to class and do it, all those things, because it's that curiosity that kills the cat. It's if you eliminate the curiosity by talking and sharing and having a conversation, a healthy conversation,
right.
Then you're less likely to go, just like when you're on a diet, if you take away everything that you love out of the food that you eat, then the minute you're exposed to it, you're going to go binge on it.
Right.
So if you little bits and everything in moderation and things, you're less likely to go from one extreme to another.
Right.
Nice. And so I got a couple, or all these kind of next questions can be all kind of coupled into one. And then we'll take like a second break, and then we'll take a little break, and then we'll go into like all of the like questions that I found on websites and whatnot that people are asking that we can kind of answer really quickly. How can we make the topic of sex education not embarrassing, right? Because whether maybe like you said, like maybe parents are uneducated, so it's embarrassing for them because their kids are coming in with the answers, and they're like, I don't know. What are some tools and some phrases and some things that parents can do to make it less embarrassing between their kids and them, essentially?
I think doing what we're doing, having conversations and making it available to people. Like, so you're not, you're not the only parent that feels uncomfortable, or, just the more and more we share and get it out there, the less embarrassing it becomes.
Well, and the flip side of that too is be embarrassed.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we don't talk about the emotions, or we want to shut down the emotions that we're feeling. And I know that a lot of times with kids, we forget to ask our kids, like, how are like feeling? Like, what are you feeling right now? How are you feeling? How does this make you feel? We just interpret whatever we see instead of asking. If you're embarrassed, feel embarrassed. Say you're embarrassed. It's okay. And even as a parent, say, this makes me a little uncomfortable too. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think
it justifies their feelings.
Right. It does.
Last night I had to have it wasn't about sex ed, but even I just had a conversation with my son, and it was about the use of electronics. But I was like, we're still learning every single day. I am learning how to be a parent in different realms, and I'm open and honest about I don't know it all.
Right. Exactly. So lean into whatever the emotion is for you. Say it and be okay with it. And if you want to not be embarrassed anymore, be okay with being embarrassed now, and say, my goal is to move out of feeling embarrassed about it. That can be another goal for you. But there's nothing, emotions aren't wrong. And even if you have a what we would call, I guess, a negative emotion, having it is not wrong. Acting on it would be, that's kind of where we go from. But being embarrassed is not a bad emotion. It's just an emotion. So be okay with it.
Just get over it. Yeah, something that I learned in high school.
Don't get over it. I wouldn't.
Oh yeah, that's a bad word. Yeah, it comes from like all my coaches just saying get over it. In high school, I learned from a guy named Simon Sinek, and he talks about how the feelings of excitement and nervousness are the same drug, right? That when you're nervous, it's technically the same drug as being excited. So whenever you're nervous, just be excited. It's like it's just an emotion. It's just a drug in your head. Like it's okay to swap it from being embarrassed to being curious, right? Because now you've kind of same drug, but now it's a completely different standpoint. Now instead of being afraid to ask questions, being curious is the same drug compound, and now you're okay to ask questions. Just like nervousness and excitement are the same thing. We just kind of use that it was mainly in wrestling, because in wrestling we'd always be like, oh, we're so nervous to fight this guy, but really, if you kind of flipped it to excitement, and you were even more, it was same exact thing. You were still jittery, your heart rate was still up, you were still sweaty, you were just ready to go and stuff.
That goes into a whole nother discussion about mindset.
Yes, exactly. Mindset is great.
Okay, let me put a pause really quick.